Good morning. My name is Gavin Bray, Business Development Executive here at Alliance 2020. Wanted to welcome you all to our first webinar. So the legal landscape in the background screening world, for the most part, stays consistent, but there are always laws that are changing, and there's legal processes that an employer must follow in certain situations as well that are easy to follow, but also easy to miss and can land employers in hot water. One of those processes is called your pre-adverse and your adverse action. The premise being that the court systems aren't perfect, things happen, reports get switched, or an 8 is written by the clerk and it needed to be a 3. And where I'm getting at is, in the event that an employer does not hire somebody or is potentially not going to hire somebody based off of the information that they see on a background check, an employer must allow that candidate an opportunity to review the information that the employer is looking at. And if they feel that there is any inaccurate information on said report, they may open up a dispute with the background screening company. And so, that process is going to be called your pre-adverse and adverse action. There's a few steps involved, and I'm just going to get into the steps, and then we're going to go into some nuanced laws in different parts of the country that may affect you as an employer. And again, easy to follow, but also easy to miss. So, as I said, in the event that an employer does not hire them based off of a background check report, any information, whole or in part, quote unquote, they must provide candidate with a pre-adverse action notice. Now, this we recommend is going to be delivered in paper, and for the most part, your background screening provider should have these notices, templates available to you so you can easily grab them and send them out to the candidate. In the pre-adverse action notice will be a letter stating that if they feel like there's inaccurate information on the background check, that they may open up a dispute with the background screening provider. There's going to be a copy of the FCRA, summary of your rights, and then there's going to be a copy of the actual report that the employer is making the decision to not hire them off of. The law just states, the federal law, Fair Credit Reporting Act, states that you have to give the candidates a reasonable amount of time before you close the door on the individual. The candidate is going to open a dispute if they feel that there is inaccurate information on the report. They're going to open that dispute up directly with the background screening company, not the employer. Most background screening companies are going to open up a dispute and get it resolved within a couple days. And if there truly was inaccurate information that was listed on the report, that background screening provider will provide an updated version of the report to the employer. If an employer does not hear from anybody in that reasonable amount of time, which we always recommend about 5 business days, then that employer may send out the adverse action notice. And the adverse action notice is just a more simple letter, and it just states that they are not going to move forward with employment with the candidate. Keep in mind that there's no, unless you live in a specific area or work in a specific area, there's no law or there's nothing that says that you can't pursue employment with another more qualified individual if you happen to find that person in the time frame of the dispute process. So that's the federal law, Fair Credit Reporting Act requirements. So now I'd just like to get into some more nuanced laws that may affect you as an employer. And we're just going to start with our friends down in California. So the pre-adverse action notice is where we're going to have the additional requirements. So before that pre-adverse notice is actually sent out, though, to the candidate, the employer must make an individualized assessment, which there's nothing that states that it has to be in writing, but always good to document everything and do that assessment in writing. In the pre-adverse notice itself, the employer must send out the actual criminal history or conviction history that bars them from employment and make a connection between the criminal history and the job that the person is applying for. You do have to keep the job open for 5 days in California, and after that 5 days, you would send out the adverse action notice. Moving up to Portland, there's no pre-adverse action requirements on top of what the Fair Credit Reporting Act requires, but in the adverse action notice, an employer must put the criminal conviction history that's going to bar them from employment. They're going to have to list that in the pre-adverse notice, kind of like down in California. Moving up to Seattle, any employers working in Seattle, the pre-adverse notice, they're actually going to have to put the criminal history in the pre-adverse notice and why it relates to the job. And they are also going to have to allow the candidate an opportunity to basically explain themselves, essentially, with the employer. They also must keep the job open for 2 business days, and then after that, they could pursue employment with another individual. So those are some of the high points and some of the important facets of the pre-adverse and adverse action notice. We're always here to help, and if you have any questions, always happy to answer them. Stay tuned for our next webinar.